Okay. So today is January 17th, 2023, and I'm here with Dave Kenneally, who is my wonderful, wonderful friend. And I'm just going to be just smidge distracted because I'm clicking admit when people come in. Um, but I wanted to just begin by introducing Dave so that you know who he is. I think most everybody here knows who I am. You might not, and if so, you'll have to learn another day because I'm not introducing myself. But we know we want to know who Dave is, and so Dave Kenneally has been my friend since about 2002 or three, right? Was that about when you started coming to Sangha?
Exactly.
And so we practiced together in a group in Brooklyn. And we met every Sunday I went very diligently for 7 years until I moved from one place to another. And Dave continued long after that and then went and lived for a year or a year and a half or two in a monastery and then became a monk.
5 years, yeah.
I, were you in the monastery 5 years before you became a monk? Wow.
uh, yeah, I did. I did about 3.5 or 4 years in the monastery as a layperson before I
Oh,
ordained.
wow. Time flew.
Mhm.
Yeah, because I would visit him there and we'd hang out and anyway, so and then he became a monk and then at some point he made some changes and now is teaching mindfulness and I'm sure you'll introduce more, but what I want to say about Dave is this. I met Dave and was like immediately, excuse my itchy nose, immediately like attracted by his open good heart and look at that smile. I mean, you didn't have to you don't need me to explain. And then what I saw is years and years of really not only diligent practice, but genuine good-heartedness. And so I just continued to just love and admire Dave for forever. And I know it's very mutual. We have a really good relationship. And over the years, we've just had wonderful, wonderful talks. And one of the reasons I wanted to really introduce him to the Blissipline community is because I think Dave embodies a particular understanding that is really helpful. Dave has also been a Marine and has also, I hope it's okay when you say this, has had plenty of trauma in his life and has worked with it very diligently. And he has a very deep understanding of pain, a very personal and deep understanding of pain. In fact, I'm just going to out us both a little bit. We were chatting right before the call. This is okay, Dave.
Please.
We were chatting right before the call, and we were sharing how we both, in the last 2 days, me one day and Dave another, woke up in a bad funk and had to work our way out of it. And we were talking about how great it is to have the tools to work your way out of a bad funk, and then also to have the resources and resilience to be able to sit with the bad feelings too and find that beautiful dance of compassion, self-compassion. Do I get to really work to feel better right now, or do I give myself some space to really feel like crap right now? Like, where is this self-compassion and what is the most beneficial and empowered choice? And so we literally were talking about doing that yesterday and today. So there is a way that I know there are teachers who appear to have, it all solved, you know, they just seem to be, but I am not one of those people. And I know Dave isn't one of those people. We recognize that we're still in the midst, and our very in the midstness can really help people. My in the midst is such a different in the midst than it was when I started this journey. So my personal beginning of the journey was characterized by despair and suicidal ideation and feeling worthless and self-loathing and all kinds of yucky crap like that. And now it is a different midst, and it's a midst that is mostly characterized by empowerment, hopefulness, possibility. And so Dave, walking a similar walk, is going to share with us his powerful and skillful viewpoint on this. And Dave teaches out of San Diego and has an online sangha that I'm going to really encourage everybody to give a try. They meet Sundays, and Dave will tell us a little bit more about that. And is also going to do a full-on course starting, when is it, next week?
February 8th.
February 8th, so February 8th, and so we'll make sure he introduces that before we go. So there are a lot of resources that Dave brings to the online community And then also, if you happen to be in San Diego, there's probably some in-person components time to time too. So I think I'll leave it at that, Dave, and take it away, my beautiful friend.
Thank you, Mary. Well, first let me
Bless
just
you, or whatever that was.
kind of a half cough. I don't
God bless you.
know. Let me just start with gratitude. So fun to be here. Really grateful for the invitation. As Mary has described, we've been friends for 20 years, and uh, Mary was one of my first teachers in the mindfulness tradition of the Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh when I first kind of started going, and like, from way back here, like the outsider popping in every once in a while, sort of suspiciously and skeptically checking out what was going on in there because I had enjoyed some of Thich Nhat Hanh's books. Mary was one of the people that helped me to see what was really happening. That a group of like real human beings had come together, not in some worship of something that can't be proved, not in some cult-like devotion to to a single figure, but really as like real human beings had come together and said like, wow, life is hard, and we're benefiting from some of these teachings and practicing them and experimenting with them. Let's get together and talk about that every week. Let's get together and do that together every week. And I didn't know how badly I was looking for that. I was still a pretty young man. And now I see in hindsight that I was starving. I was starving for that because what I had been doing in an attempt to manage, how overwhelming life is and how frightening it can be and how confusing it can be and on and on and on. I was trying to solve the problem from the outside. And that's, for example, why I joined the military. Like, people ask me now, that was a long time ago. That was over 25 years ago. Why did you do that? Like, why did you go into the Marine Corps? Like, it's so dangerous and so violent, so extreme. And my answer to that question has changed, over the last 25 years. And the one that I would say now is this: like, if you look at a television commercial for the military, look, what you see is this cartoonish transformation, right? You see the young man or woman, a teenager, right? A high school kid is who they're advertising to. And so that's the brain, right, that the advertisement is designed for. And they show that kid to themselves, like sitting on the couch, playing video games, eating potato chips, like maybe even, being physically unhealthy. And then by the end of the commercial, the kid is, in a starched uniform, like with a sword in their hand, lions are roaring and thunderbolts are firing, and they've gone through this incredible transformation. They've gone from this thing that is depicted so negatively in the beginning to this final product that is depicted, with no nuance, right? With no negativity, just like, this is a good thing. Don't you want to be this? And the idea that making that choice, that going down that path, like, might result in death, because joining the military, especially in the United States, like, has that element to it. We're a country that's constantly at war. That actually goes part and parcel with what I'm describing, because the reason I made that choice, and the reason I think a lot of young people make that choice, among the reasons, right, because there's economic pressures and other things like that. I was raised very poor. That didn't help. But I think what's happening is that people are so, especially young people, are so unhappy inside of their own skin, so unhappy inside of their own lives. They're so desperate for some kind of transformation that not only are they willing to die for it, but they'd rather die than not have it. They'd rather die than continue. And that was the young person I was. As a teenager, I was in a situation where I was so unhappy and felt so powerless inside of that unhappiness that I would rather have died than continued on like that. It was just too painful. It was just too painful. It was more than I could bear. And so in a lot of ways, I look back on it now and I see like, oh, I was like kind of flirting between military life or suicide. Like those were the two things that seemed like they could promise escape. Promise escape. And so now, like 25 years later, as Mary was talking about, when, you know, to continue that fun thread, like for me, that day was today. I woke up today in a really bad mood. Like, oh, just angry, anxious, judgmental, blaming. Like, you know, I was like in the shower, just like thinking about people in a negative way and pointing the finger. And, you know, I don't need to tell anybody here, like we've all had some version of that experience. It may look differently. Your negative state may be an anxious one. Right? It may be really frightened as opposed to angry. Your negative state might be really depressed, you know, kind of paralyzed and immobilized and de-energized, and on, right? It doesn't really matter. We all have that. We all have our shutdown style. And I sat myself down in the bed and I was like, wow, you know, because it didn't make sense. Like I was so excited about this call. I'm so excited about a lot of things today, actually. Today is my best friend's birthday. Like there were a lot of wonderful things about today. But there I was. And so I sat myself down on the edge of my bed and I just had a little conversation with myself, right? Because I've been training in these practices for a long time, right? Like that didn't come out of nowhere. I spent a lot of time in lower stakes, safer environments that are very conducive to that kind of self-examination, and examine my mind in neutral moments and in happy moments to develop the capacity to sit on the edge of that bed in a moment of distress, in a moment of anger for me, and just check in. So that's maybe where we can start, right? This is what we're talking about. All these practices, you know, this smorgasbord of different ways that we can understand our emotions and our psychology and our biology and our experience of being a human being. No, they take training. My experience is they take training over a long period of time with support, teachers like Mary and groups like this. And then when the rubber hits the road and when things start to get really intense, if you've been doing that training in positive moments, in neutral moments, in slightly irritating moments, then years in, you develop the capacity to just sit yourself down, as I did this morning. And I sat myself down and I was like, wow, dude, you are already in a really bad place. Like, this is not going to be a good day if you stay in this mindset. You're not going to be a fun person to interact with for other people or for yourself. What needs to change right now? And the answer was like, oh, well, I need to be nicer to myself, because the reason I was in all that externalized judgment this morning, the reason I woke kind of angry at a half a dozen people about a half a dozen things, was because for the last couple of days, I've been really hard on myself for a variety of reasons, you know, just mostly just work stuff, but I'm just I put too much pressure on myself sometimes. And that manifests in internalized shame and blame and attack and abandonment. You can only drink so much of something before it comes back out. So if for days I've been filling myself up with that kind of negative thinking, it's eventually going to come out. And it came out this morning. And the last thing I want to say, because I really want to hear from some of you, you know, I wanted this to be more of a conversation than just me giving a talk. But I want to point out, I think, one of the most important things Mary spoke about in her introduction. Because one of the reasons why it's so difficult to take up a mindfulness practice or to go into psychotherapy or to take up the practice of going for a silent walk with oneself at the beginning of every day. Like one of the reasons why things like that are so hard is because the reality is that I've been avoiding certain things for a reason. I've been avoiding certain things in my mind and in my heart, and sometimes even in my body, because they hurt, because they scare me, because I don't know exactly how to handle them. And so it's very important as we go into all these practices to remember, just because I can do all these things, just because I can sit in meditation for an hour and a half without moving, doesn't mean I should. Doesn't mean that's always the right answer. It's more nuanced than that. It's more about getting to understand ourselves just as I would another person, right? And be like, oh, am I in the right mood for this now? Do I have the capacity for this now? Should I be gentle now, or should I be a little bit of a taskmaster? The practice really is not about, learning how to be a Buddhist statue or learning how to be anything other than we are. The practice is about learning who we really are. Mindfulness is a self-examination. It's an exploration of every aspect of ourselves. I think that's a good place to start.
All right, awesome. Thank you, Dave. Yeah. When you say who we really are, I think I'd like to note that a big part of who we really are is how we really are. Because how I am right here now in this moment um, is who I am right here and now in this moment. And so there's this ever-changing quality of being that we may or may not be aware of. And as Dave and I were preparing for this, we were talking about what we might talk about. And there was this sort of overview that we were talking about where there's this sort of beginning of awareness of self that leads into the capacity to manage the self, as we were talking about, we had to do with ourselves. And then you have a choice to choose from. What do I do? How do I navigate this? How do I care for myself? How do I care for others? You don't really have choice till you have awareness, and because until then the conditioning is driving the show. And then through that we find our way to self-love. So there's this sort of self-awareness to self-love path that we're talking about here today. And I guess I would note for myself, and I'm gonna invite you to weigh on this in on this too, Dave. Self-love is something I am now capable of, first of all, in ways I never was before, but it is not about like, oh, I think I'm so awesome. And it is not about, oh, I want to give myself everything I want. It's really about being able to love myself the same way maybe so I have this cat who's sitting behind me on the chair here, and I don't dare move because if I move, he bites me. He's a really awful cat. And the reason I have this cat is because he was in a shelter and they didn't know what to do with him because he was kind of aggressive towards people and aggressive towards the other cats and incontinent. He was never going to get adopted. And so we said, fine, he can come live in our barn, and but no, he decided to move into my office. So he and I now have been interacting together for about 4 or 5 years. And he's very annoying and he's incontinent and he bites me and and I really love him and I really care for him. I see how he tries. It's really interesting. I see his little triggered nervous system. I see how he makes friends with other cats, like really tentatively, and then he gets triggered and he hisses at them, and then if they can handle it and they just sort of back off, I'm like, okay, dude, then they can be friends. But if they spring away, then they can't be friends. And now so I see him and I love him, and really my self-love for myself is kind of the same. It's like I see myself and I know I still get triggered, I know I still get cranky, I know I still have a temper, but I'm also very loving and creative and hilarious, if I don't mind saying so myself. So, so there's just a love for the organism that is Mary and all my mess and complexity. And I don't think I would have ever known this was possible except by doing the slowing down awareness of coming to know my thoughts and my feelings and this moment, just practicing being here and now.
that cycle, self-awareness to self-management to self-love, like, appears to be linear, but it's really not. It's a complete circle, because if I dive into self-awareness, if I start, as Mary's describing, if I start trying to get to know who I am, then very quickly I see that I have these massive blind spots. I have these parts of myself that are driving my behavior, that are controlling actions that I'm taking, that are causing me to react in certain situations. But I don't have a real clear handle on what those parts of myself are all about. I don't know why they're so reactive. I haven't looked inside them very deeply. And so without that awareness, how can I manage that spot, right? Just like I couldn't manage a room of people in an office if I never visited them, if I never met with them, if I never read their reports. I can't manage my anxiety if every time it comes up I ignore it, or I drink it away, or I, social media myself out of it. So I have no awareness. I have no capacity to manage. And so then when I look at that, I'm like, well, how do I increase my awareness? How do I get a better look at this thing that's so hard to look at? I have to be more loving to myself. I have to accept myself more, because if every time the thing that challenges me, if every time the thing I really want to change comes up, I start yelling at it, or I feel terrible about it, or I think about only its negative qualities, because even the worst, most challenging emotion has a positive side. Depression is a healthy withdrawal from overwhelm. Anxiety is a healthy reminder to maintain my boundaries, because my own safety is important to me. Right? Anger is sometimes a healthy sign that something is really wrong in this environment or in this moment, and I should investigate it. So everything has its positive side, but I can't see that if every time I look at myself, I'm looking myself in total judgment, total judgment. And so in the end, self-awareness is the self-love. They're the exact same thing. Just like the grandparent can watch, right? The mature grandparent can watch their grandchild stumble and fall and cry and laugh and scream and go through a whole roller coaster of emotion.
Right.
In just dispassionate love, right? And every once in a while, sure, they'll intervene. They'll take away the dangerous thing. They'll wipe away the tear. They'll tap the child back onto the path so they don't, wander off the sidewalk into the street. But generally, they're just in a loving acceptance. And this is what we're trying to cultivate for ourselves. This is how we actually get to know ourselves, is by getting down off the stage where the drama's happening and where we're doing all the things, and go sit in the audience every once in a while. Watch ourselves, as I did this morning, and I just watched myself for a minute being really upset and really angry. And then, then solutions presented themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful, Dave. So I was thinking, so Sam said a really interesting thing I'm going to get to, and I would like anyone to post what they want in the comments, what they would like to post in the comments. But I was thinking maybe we could do just a little bit of practice together, just a little short practice. And then I'd really invite people to see how it is for you. And then we'll have a little back and forth in conversation, and you can ask or say anything about either the practice or what we've already said, and we can take this a little deeper. So how's that sound?
Love it.
Okay. All right.
So maybe I'll just lead like 5 minutes of meditation right now or something like that.
Yeah, 5, 10, something like that. Something, let yourself be easy.
So the first thing that I want to be really clear about is that what we're doing, it's begun, right? It's begun right now. And what we're doing is just kind of leaning backwards. It'd be very easy to look at a moment of meditation or a moment of mindfulness practice as just another thing to do. as another thing we have to task we have to check off our list. So let's avoid that trap, right? By first just getting in touch with our bodies for a moment and just getting a little bit more relaxed. Whatever that means to you. For me, that means leaning backwards instead of leaning kind of forwards towards the camera. For some of you, it may mean closing your eyes and smiling. For others, it might mean looking down at something 3 or 4 feet in front of you on the floor with open eyes. If I do that now, I'd land on the H on my keyboard, for example. And just letting my eyes soften, looking at the H on my keyboard. So you see, it's more of an allowing than an extra doing. Then I bring my awareness to my hands and I try to find rest for them. If my hands are busy, my mind is busy. So I let them sit in my lap or in my sweatshirt pocket. And then I set intention. And I say, well, for the next 5 minutes with Mary and Dave and the gang, I'm not going to try to do anything. I'm not going to try to get it right. I'm not going to try to be calm. I'm just going to let myself feel exactly how I feel right now. And I'm just going to let myself think anything I'm thinking right now. Just going to be a human being. This is important to do at the beginning of a period of formal practice like this, because anything can come up. We can have any feeling right now. We can think any thought right now. So I like to remind myself every single time at the beginning of my practice that it's okay to think anything and it's okay to feel anything. If during the next 3 minutes, something starts to itch or hurt, or your foot starts to fall asleep because you got into some position you're not comfortable in, adjust yourself. Don't pretend that because you're sitting still in discomfort, you're being any more mindful. That's a trap. Now I'm going to invite just one sound to the bell, and I invite us just to listen to it. Just be with it. After this one sound of the bell, we'll sit together for just 1 minute in silence. Just breathing, just feeling what it feels like to be Mary and Dave and Sam and Renee. And then I'll bring us back with another invitation of 2 sounds of the bell. Be gentle with yourself. Enjoy feeling what it feels like to be you today, just for 1 minute. Thanks, everyone.
Beautiful, Dave. Thank you. All right. Well, we would love to welcome some thoughts and questions and experiences. How did that meditation go for you? There's no right or wrong. And if you hated it, that is a really useful thing to talk about. And so you're welcome to put your hand up in the chat. If you go to the bottom, it says reactions. You could just put your hand up and that'll tell us you want to, or you could write in the chat, I want to talk. And as you're sort of formulating your questions, I just like to say one thing that I think was really important to me at the beginning of my practice that I think Dave exemplified today that I'd like to note. The first thing that the when I found the tradition of Thich Nhat Hanh, the community of mindfulness is what it's called, and that's where Dave and I met. Before that, I had been practicing in a Japanese Zen tradition. And, I was just doing anything. I went to everything. I was just trying to find something that would help with my despair, really. And the Japanese Zen tradition, I spent a couple of weekends doing retreats and I went and I sat with them. They had a very, very strict practice that you were expected to sit very, very still. And if you moved during the zazen, which is what they call it, the moderator would say, stop moving. And they did do that thing. They hit you with the stick, but only if you ask, just to be clear. I know that's one of those stories about Japanese Zen. They come and hit you with a stick, but actually they will whack you with a stick right on right here, supposedly supposed to stimulate blood flow on some major arteries. It doesn't hurt. I had them do it once, so anyways, I thought I'd acknowledge that. But that strict practice, while it might be good for many people, and I'm not saying it isn't, I know it is, for me, it replicated some of my trauma history, that it forced me to suppress my feelings. And I had suppressed my feelings so much already that, for example, I couldn't tell if I needed to go to the bathroom until my stomach was sticking out. Like I would have to visually discover I had to go to the bathroom because I had suppressed that kind of information. That wasn't like my appetite, all kinds of things. My needs were so far off the table that I actually needed a tradition that wouldn't continue to do that. And when I found the community of mindfulness and in the meditation instructions, you were welcome to notice if you were in pain or itching or whatever, and to mindfully attend to your body, to care for it with love and mindfulness. It was like a revelation for me. And so I just thought I'd mention that because Dave modeled that a little bit here today. And I wanted to really affirm the value of it. What is very, very important to me is that all the stuff I do be trauma informed, because so many of us are walking around just kind of like habitual traumatized state, which was a fabulous survival tactic when we were younger. It got us through, and brilliant survival tactics of the younger self. So no condemnation necessary, but so painful as an adult as we begin to notice it. And so freeing ourselves from that requires a great deal of self-compassion. So I thought I would note that. So, all right. Well, we have two hands up. Sam raised her hand and Lisa raised her hand. Sam, do you want to go first? And Trumi says, yes, I love the gentle way Dave started the meditation.
Yeah, I had just lowered my hand. I was like, yeah, yes, I do. It's weird. I came on here because obviously, what an amazing opportunity to get to have this amazing teacher on with us, and did not expect at all to go here today. Today's a special anniversary for me today, so there was already a lot of thought about this in my head, but it was good. It was very positive. And then no offense, when you started doing your introduction and you went, I'm a Marine, and I went, hoorah, because my late husband, Marine, and then, stuff that was being said. And today just happens to be the 20-year anniversary since he killed himself. And he was a Marine drafted, one of the few that were drafted for Vietnam. And then as you were talking, I started going, and they came down, they gave him drugs to do special jobs. And he came back addicted. And then I started thinking about how he got spit on when he walked off the plane. And I went, whoa, 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 where you're going. And I'm like, you're on a mindfulness thing. And my energy lowered, and I felt, oh, my heart started pounding and the blood's rushing to my face. And I stopped. I just breathed. And then after I was breathing, I was able to go, this isn't who you're communicating with. You're so past this. And maybe there's still stuff in there to let go. But when I'm dancing with him, in my mind, a song will come on and we're having our anniversary moment because I communicate with him like that. It's who he is now, not who he was during that. I'm like, I don't want to relive the whole thought form BS stuff. So it turned out okay, although I couldn't stop my heart from pounding even after I came back into a decent place. And then the reason I just lowered my hand is because we just did that really beautiful awareness meditation. And other than it reminded me to take my heart pressure medicine, I felt really good and calm again. And I wasn't sure if I should bring it up or not bring it up. So, ta-da! That's my story.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you, Sam.
Thanks, Sam. Wow.
You're welcome.
I love what Mary reminded us, before Sam sharing that we're all walking around in a trauma body. It looks different, right? And, your trauma is different than my trauma, and your response to it is different than mine, but nobody gets out of this game unscathed. Being a human being is rough and tumble. So, yeah, thank you, Sam, for sharing some of how you're touching what we're trafficking in right here today. Thank you.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah. So let me just note a couple of the comments and then we'll go to you, Lisa. Will said, this was new to me too, a deliberate mention that you don't need to punish yourself for not performing your meditation correctly. I know, exactly. What we do is we just bring the same, if we aren't paying attention, we just bring the same attitudes and mindset into spiritual practices, and then they just become, I think, what Trungpa Rinpoche called spiritual materialism. That we just really, we don't really understand there is a kind of freedom from all of that we are working to develop. So yeah, thank you. And hi, Raina, we saw your message. And Teresa mentions that with TM, which is transcendental meditation, if you need to get up urgently, that's okay. And then you just go back to sitting, right? So there's a spaciousness in the TM practices too. So yeah, beautiful. So Lisa, did you lower your hand on purpose, or would you like to still say hi? You're welcome to come on camera or not.
I'm going to come on camera, even though, whatever. But hi, everybody. I am so grateful to be here because this is just exactly what I needed to hear, the depths of, where we come from our trauma. And it's the fact that I'd rather die than feel my feelings. And that's pretty harsh. I don't know how to handle them. I don't know what it is that I'm feeling. That as a child, I just went numb and I stayed numb. And people would talk about, well, I feel this way and that way. And I'm like, I don't get it. And then as an adult, I realized like, I'm just numb and I don't feel like a very good person. And, I use things outside of myself to deal with everything. And it didn't get better, it got worse. And I realized like, this is just not who I am. Like, I'm a really loving and kind person. And how do I get there? What do I do? And the search started, and I went through so many different things. I mean, just to find out who I am, and that spiritual connectuality with me, I found it in Buddhism. Because that's me being within me. I don't like practice, but I do a lot of the meditations. I do refuge recovery. So, and it's just being with myself and learning how to sit with myself and feel those feelings. And I am so grateful for that meditation. And it was just a silent meditation. I was actually able to be still and just, if anything came up, I just watched it and go. And I just watched it and go. And I was okay with how I felt. And I actually moved to make myself comfortable. I don't do that normally. Like you said, Mary, I hold my pee till I'm going to explode. And, you know, I'm not, I'll turn the cold water, I'll turn the cold water on and I want the warm water. Like, why?
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense, but it's just our conditioned mind. Be okay in the chaos and the pain. And I'm not there anymore. I need to be, and I've been so hard on myself the past couple of days. I just wanted to give up. And it's like, do I have a fear of success or is it a fear of failure? And I think with me, it's the fear of success. And that's not me anymore. I'm a completely different person than I was 10 years ago, 15 years ago. And the journey of just actually being in the moment and being okay with myself and being relaxed is absolutely amazing when you're there. And accepting when we're not there and having the tools, though, is a beautiful thing. And, you know, of course, I struggle with it and it's not always easy, but I find myself suffering a lot less these days. And I find myself actually being able to be present. And it's, I don't know, it's so different. It's like, you know, you're so alert, but the world is so 3D and you're feeling everything. And it almost feels like I'm going into trauma mode, but I'm not. I'm present. And it's just so different and wonderful. And I just thank everybody for being here and being so brutally honest and sharing. And thank you very much.
Beautiful. Thank you, Lisa.
Lisa. One of my favorite teachings comes up for me as I listen to Lisa sharing. I actually have it on my water glass right now. You can't read this, but it says healing is happening. And the way I was taught this was by one of my mentors. He was a monk at the time, amazing Swedish mindfulness teacher. Back then his name was Taifab Ho. And Taifab Ho got a cut on his hand one day. And we were roommates. You know, he was my mentor, and usually when you're a novice monk, you live with one of the elders so that there's somebody there guiding your practice 24 hours a day. It's part of the training. And he pointed at the cut and he was like, brother, look at this cut. He's like, it's not that bad, right? But it could be, right? It could get infected and become a real problem. And he's like, and so here's my practice. Right? I have to strike a balance, because if I completely ignore the cut, and if I don't take a little bit of care of it and keep it clean and keep it dry, then it could get infected and it could become a huge problem. It's like, so I can't completely ignore this difficulty. He's like, but if I overemphasize the problem of the cut, if I spend all day worrying about it, if I'm constantly picking at it, well, we know how that goes, right? Then it will never heal. Like, so my practice is to do a little bit of both, right? To pay just enough loving attention to it that it has the care that it requires, but largely to not focus on it and to stay focused on other things, stay focused on positive things. And if I can manage that, then the healing happens on its own. And the healing happens on its own because my body wants to move towards balance. My mind wants to move towards peace. And so, yeah, it's tricky. It's tricky to strike that balance. It takes a long time to even start to be able to see the scale. Yeah, thank you, Lisa.
Yeah, beautiful. And I love that, you know, balance is so often a swinging wildly from one extreme to the other, you know, but that's how we learn, you know, when you have a little child and they're getting up and falling over and getting up and falling over and getting up and falling over, you know, you don't yell at them, find your balance, you idiot. You know, you just understand they're finding it little by little. And that's how we do too, when we give ourselves permission to explore.
One of the things, because I came to Buddhist practice, to mindfulness meditation practices, you know, with the same mind that made me join the Marines, right? With a very angry and self-abandoning perspective. And so I used these practices in that violent way for years,
Yeah, me too.
years.
Me too.
And now the way I look at that in hindsight, right? Because that was 20 years ago, is I look at myself like a guitar. Like a guitar constantly needs to be tuned, right? If the guitar's in a cold room, it falls out of tune. If you leave the guitar next to the warm fireplace, it falls out of tune. If you just don't play the guitar for a while, it falls out of tune, right? But that doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with the guitar, right? If I walk up to the guitar and it's out of tune and I get mad at it, does that help? If I walk up to the out of tune guitar and I smash it and throw it away, is that effective? I just have to tune it a little bit, over and over and over again. And if I can accept that, then I can have this incredible relationship with the guitar. The guitar can be one of the most beautiful and positive things in my and many people's lives.
Yeah.
I'm the guitar. We're the guitar. And we just have to accept it. Just have to tune myself a little bit some days and a lot some days.
That's right. A little some days and a lot some days. William says I'm hugging my out of tune guitar right now, which is probably partly metaphor and partly real. There he is.
Hey, Will.
Exactly. Yeah. I think I'm glad you mentioned that about how you used these practices like a bludgeon. I posted something on my page or my whatever my whatever you call it feed the other day, which was two like cavemen with talk bubbles, and one is holding the talk bubble and kind of hitting the ground with it, and then the other has the talk bubble and says, "No, use it for talking like this." And I really thought that's what's like the practice. And here's a crazy thing. You know how when you're learning meditation, people say a million times, when the mind wanders, and it will, or the mind is going to wander. I think it took me 5 years. I'm not kidding, 5 years. And we talk every week practicing with a group, right? Yeah. Couldn't hear it. To realize, oh, the mind's going to wander. Until that moment, every time I caught my mind wandering, I thought I was a failure. For 5 years, like, how did I miss that? And so it taught me we have to really overcome a lot of conditioned beliefs in order to learn self-love and presence. And yeah.
I mean, imagine the violence, right? The self-violence of being in a moment where you're really triggered. Like, I'll use myself as the example. Like, if I, was in a moment when something had happened that had made me really angry, which means, right, in my case, if I'm really angry externally, it means internally I'm really afraid. Right? So something has just really deeply scared me. And now imagine if in that moment, in fear and rage, I was being hard on myself because I wasn't quietly taking 3 conscious breaths, right? Like, can you hear the violence in that? How unreasonable that is, how self-abandoning that is, how unbeneficially judgmental that is. And yet that's what I did, as Mary's describing, for years when I discovered these practices, as opposed to, right, trying to take those mindful breaths when I'm calm, trying to take those mindful breaths when I'm happy, right? So that eventually over time, I could be having that same angry response, but there be this part of me that I'd been training and cultivating that was a little bit calm. This part of me that was watching it happen and be like, oh, Dave, look at you go. You're really freaked out right now, buddy. You're really freaked out right now, buddy. Why? Why are you so freaked out? Why are you so afraid? You notice that's what's happening internally, but I want you to picture that I'm having the same external action. Right? Because just because we want to, we can't change a behavior that we spent decades cultivating that maybe made sense at one point. We can only start being aware.
Yeah. Beautiful. That gentle.
Yeah.
Renee just raised her hand. I was thinking I'm going to go ahead and invite her to go. Will, I'm going to turn off your camera just so we can invite Renee to come on.
I unmuted myself. Was I supposed to?
Yes, you were. And you're welcome to start your camera too if you want. I won't do it without your permission.
Oh, gosh. Well, I prefer to be off camera today.
Fine.
Oh, God. I have to say, it is such a pleasure to be here with all of you. The realness and the integrity of the sharing is just, oh, it just feeds my soul. So thank you to the whole group. Anyway, Renee here. Hi, Mary.
Hi.
We haven't met, but I was introduced to Thich Nhat Hanh, about a year ago. And I am just blown away with his mindfulness teachings. They have
Wonderful.
opened the door for me to actually be a Zen Buddhist practitioner.
Yeah.
And I didn't think that was going to be available to me. It always seemed just too lofty, maybe, or too intellectual. The whole idea of Buddhism. So, I'm not saying I knew, what it was, but I am very grateful that I have this practice, and I practice with Dave. So, hi, Dave.
Hi, Renee.
Beautiful.
I have loved the Sunday sanghas and the one-on-ones and the classes. I had no idea. I was shocked when I first heard him talk about self-compassion and loving ourselves. I wasn't taught that. I was always being, corrected and disciplined. And I think all of us were, and we took it upon ourselves to think we were flawed and that something was wrong with us. So to actually give myself permission and forgiveness and space, when I make a mistake, oh my goodness, it is so liberating and wonderful. And I told Dave, sometimes I even hug myself, it's like, and I talk to myself and say, good girl.
Yes. That's so
And you
nice.
know what? I feel it, it goes in. So I'm very grateful for that. That has been just an incredible teaching and part of the practice. And, being able to sit and forgive yourself, being able to meditate and just keep at it. I journal and I don't judge it. I just let myself put my feelings out there. So I've been liberated in so many ways with this practice that I am just joyous. And I wanted to tell you, and Mary, I don't know what you do, but, include me with whatever it is you're doing out there, because I want to know all Thich Nhat Hanh followers. I'm just so blown away with how lovely and loving and kind and compassionate the teaching is, that I want that in my life. The last thing I want to say is, I've known about do versus be most of my adult life, and it's hard. We have to earn a living. All creatures on the planet have to earn a living. And it's easy to get caught up in do. We're great problem solvers, and I think do's wonderful. And I had a great career. And I love being successful at it. And I love that I had a daughter. I love that I was in relationships. I put a lot of effort into those, but it didn't seem to leave a lot of time for be. This is about allowing yourself to be and to purposely put that in your life. So kudos to all of you out there who are working, trying to make a living, finding any time at all to sit and give yourself that space and that love and that time just to rest and be. So I know that I'm in this space because I'm retired. I don't have to do, I'm on my own schedule. So I see that as a blessing. And I don't know what the answer is to that, other than just to try to have both in your life. Because I think now I look back all the times I was at work, I was a middle manager often, how I was not kind, not compassionate. I would have been right now, if I was a manager, I would be so different with my people just because of what I know. But it's all in hindsight.
Yeah.
Anyway, Thank you. It's good to be with you and all of you. And I'm going to bow out.
Beautiful.
Thanks, Renee.
You know, I would like to note about the doing and being thing, just that, of course, when Dave and I started, we were not retired, still aren't retired, not retired at this moment. And I was noticing how beautiful Dave's 5-minute meditation was. And within there was 1 minute of silence. And there was this preparation to it, and the 1 minute and the coming out. And I thought, what a great gem. In fact, I'm gonna pull it out of the recording and make a little separate video that we can all share, so everyone can have a little taste of that, you know, if that's okay with you, Dave. And so what the reason I think Thich Nhat Hanh was the transforming teacher for me is because he did take it out of the monastery and out of, like, mindfulness is in everyday life is exactly his practice. And I would just like to note that although I did need to learn it in like focused chunks, that really was necessary for me to learn it. When I began to really see its efficacy in my life was in my life. And there would be a moment when I remember very well specific moments when I was really spun out about something or other, you know, and I would just like grab a hold of mindfulness like the rail on the subway, you know, and I would hold onto the rail at the subway. Mindfulness, there was a very specific memory I have where I was folding laundry and I was totally spun out, and I just said no, I pulled in all my awareness and I folded, if I recall correctly, 7 pairs of underwear. Perfectly mindfully, like every aspect of my awareness focused on folding in the right side and folding in the left side and folding at the bottom and putting it on the side and getting another and spreading it out on my bed and folding. I did this for 7 pairs of underwear. At the end of the 7th pair of underwear, I was in total regulation. And I was like, holy moly. Like, it was a revelation. And so I'm really grateful to Thich Nhat Hanh for pulling it out of the monastery and out of even Buddhism. He's very clear. You don't have to be a Buddhist. You use mindfulness to go deeply into your own life, your own background, your own tradition, your family, your heart. Yeah.
Thanks, Mary. Wow. My kind of moment like that was my divorce. Like I'm divorced, and like so many people's, right? My divorce experience was terribly traumatizing. It was painful on every level. There was nothing that the pain of that didn't touch in my idea of who I was. And at the same time that happened, this crazy, terrible business thing happened. I got kind of like bamboozled in a business deal, you know, like it was awful. And also those 2 fronts of my life, like my professional life and my romantic life, both of them were in complete chaos and felt like they were failing. And I remember I was so depressed, I was so overwhelmed that the only practice I could do was I forced myself to go on a walk, on a silent walk, like with no headphones, I didn't even bring my own phone, every single day, once a day. The walk took about an hour. And that was all I could do. Like the whole rest of the day, I was overeating. I was, you know, I wasn't drinking alcohol in those days, you know, but I was doing all these other things, probably watching TV all day, you know, doing anything I could do to numb myself. Sleeping too much. And at the end of, you know, let's say this lasted for 3 or 4 months that I was in this depression. At the end of it, I looked at it and I was like, wow, the only thing that helped, the only time in most of those days that I felt good was that hour when I was walking and just feeling my feet on the ground. feeling the temperature of the outside air on my skin, like seeing the birds in the trees at the park I would walk to. And that's when I decided to deepen my practice to the next level. Like that's when I started living in monasteries. I was like, okay, like I'm in a lot of pain. Life is hard. And I see this one tool is really helping me more than any other. Let me develop that tool to the maximum of my capacity. And here I am.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah. So Rhonda would like to ask a question. She said doesn't know how to raise her hand, but Dave, are you good to keep going a little while?
Oh, sure. Yeah,
Great.
absolutely.
Rhonda, jump on in and talk about whatever you'd like to talk about, and we can also address the question you posted in the chat if you wish. Whatever you want.
That's actually the one that I wanted to talk about, because
Great.
on the call the other day I was talking about the going up for more and having that, like, observing the look at that, I feel very triggered going up for more. And the next time it happened, I did more of the SE thing on it. I said, you know what, what does this feel like? And there were tears and lots of sadness and a whole lot of stuff that came up, and I just allowed it, waves and waves and waves. And I swear to you, I can go up for more now and it doesn't bother me at all. So all of the observing, I think maybe this is the balance you might be talking about, Dave, but the observing took me only so far, but it was okay, no more standing back from this. What does this actually feel like? And feel that. And then I was on the other side of it, if there is another side, but there's something had shifted that I was not getting when I was in the audience and saying, isn't that interesting? So curious. Look how pissed, look how upset I am, that kind of thing. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Happy to, Rhonda. I want to hear what Mary has to say about this too.
Yeah. Jump on in and we'll confer.
So one way to look at it is it's a continuum. It's a continuum. It's like a roller coaster. And sometimes, right, I'm in the audience in a negative way, right? I'm in disassociation. Sometimes I'm doing something or saying something or thinking something or feeling something emotionally that I want to disconnect with so badly that I just do, right? And then I'm way far away from it, like watching myself, act out. And that's not mindfulness. Like I define mindfulness very simply as just paying attention with love. Paying attention, but with love. And so if I'm paying like a kind of a dispassionate clinical attention to myself, like, okay, there he goes, he's eating another bowl of ice cream, whatever it is, right? Then I'm not paying attention to myself in a loving way. But then all the way on the other side of that spectrum, if I'm totally in what I'm doing, like if I'm in confirmation bias, to use a neurobiological term, if I'm just, getting really angry at somebody, for example, because that's one of my habits that I have to deal with, and agreeing with myself, so I'm not in the audience at all, right? I'm on the stage and I'm angry. And the thought I'm having is like, and I'm right to be angry because that person's being a jerk and they need me to yell at them. Like, that's the only way I'm going to change this behavior, right? So that's all the way on the other end of the spectrum of the swinging pendulum. And that's also a quality of attention, right? I'm fully immersed in that experience. I'm paying attention to what I'm doing and what I'm thinking, but I'm not doing it in a loving way. And so then the center of that pendulum is the grandparent attention, is what I like to call it. It's like, the grandparent is there, like making sure that the toddler doesn't, play with something made out of glass or stick their finger in the light socket. But they're also leaning back, right? They're also giving the toddler the space to fail because they know that they have to go through that pain. They have to go through that suffering in order to grow. If the grandparent just carries them around everywhere and covers their eyes, the child won't learn, the child won't walk, the child won't grow. And so that's kind of how I like to picture this continuum that we're on. And all these practices are designed to help us move to center from either of those two extremes. I'm abandoning myself and not really paying attention in a loving way, or I'm like completely lost in myself and not paying attention in a loving way. And there's a center there that we can't stay at. I can't stay fixed at that center. I'm always going to swing to those two extremes. The game is, how much time can I spend in that center? I always need to tune my guitar, but the guitar is doing its best when I need to tune it the least.
Mm. Yeah, I like the part about the loving attention. You know, I felt in both cases, and it could be totally wrong about this, but in both cases, I felt that the observer part of me was loving, was not judgmental. It was kind of like, oh, look at that. I really feel triggered going up for seconds. And also the part that allowed me to have the full feeling of it was more like an allowing, like, okay, you can have this feeling if you want, go ahead. So in both cases, I think the commonality was the loving attention to it. There wasn't any, berating myself for doing it wrong. So but I did find it was just very interesting to me that the allowing of the full feeling, again, without judgment and in an environment of loving myself and allowing it, was so powerful for me. Really, really powerful.
Yeah. Beautiful. And when you posted the question, I'll just acknowledge, but you said, can I talk about the role of allowing ourselves to really feel the hard feeling, SE style, SE standing for somatic experiencing, versus observing the feeling from the audience. And so I think that we've looked at it really nicely, that in some ways it's like, how resilient is this grandparent, right? Because some grandparents are just fine if the toddler falls and skins his knee, but totally not okay if the toddler has a tantrum in the grocery store. Like, you know what I'm saying?
Mm.
So our observer self is only, or our capacity to embody our observer self, not the observer self itself, because that's infinite, but I mean, our capacity to embody and stay in it is only as resilient as it is. And so we actually build our capacity for sitting with ourselves slowly. And I think it's worth noting that as you were talking about last week, for example, you had that capacity last week. And this week you found a way to increase your capacity. Maybe it was just a decision because you developed the capacity ahead of time. You don't just decide and there it is. It's some development, but you have practiced somatic experience. You have sat with these difficult feelings. And so this willingness, like, okay, whoo, like, it got big, right? You had a really big feeling, but you didn't jump into a story about it. You didn't run away. You didn't say, I can't handle feeling this. You let yourself feel it. And so it's a pretty powerful level of mindful attention. And I'll just note that in the somatic experiencing understanding, specifically in healing trauma, that is a piece that we need to do to begin to allow ourselves to feel things that were suppressed. And that in the somatic experiencing world, when you're doing that with a therapist, the therapist is kind of like a big container, like a person with their arms. The therapist is the grandparent in this scenario, and uses words and kind of soft hypnotic language. Okay, just feel your feet on the floor. What are you noticing? So the therapist is the grandparent, but over time we develop our own inner grandparent that can deal with that level of intense trauma. And wasn't until my inner grandparent, I like this, I'm going to use it a lot now, my inner grandparent got well enough to do that I was able to experience what I would say was sort of the final throes of despair and depression that had been living in me for decades. And I had done it with a therapist and I'd worked on it and felt it was really good. But there was a moment I talk about all the time. I know you've heard the story, Rhonda.
I love this story. I do.
Well, I'll just tell it real quick because it was an amazing thing. I had been taught to sit through feelings the way Rhonda is talking, but I could only do so much on my own. And I still can only do so much on my own, by the way. There are still feelings I can't sit through. I jump up and run away. I'm like, nope, not today.
Yeah, same here.
So, you know, so maybe those feelings next year I'll be able to say, oh, I got those, but there'll be another depth. Who knows? But on this day, I had been recovering from depression. I had taken antidepressants 3 times. I had done mindfulness-based cognitive therapy. I taught mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, which is about recovering from depression. I'd done so much. I'd done somatic experiencing therapy. I'd trained in, I had become a somatic experiencing therapist. That was all the way through this. And I was no longer very vulnerable to depression. It was just something that I could maybe feel lurking. And if it started to arise, do something, you know? And then one day I was driving to New York City and I was on like the throughway of some kind. And I was in my big old Subaru driving along and traffic was going pretty straight. And suddenly, out of seemingly nowhere, this wash of feeling flooded over me. And it was just complete despair, like hopelessness, like the worst feeling I'd ever had in those nights when I was a teenager and I really didn't know how I would get through the night, you know? And, but I was ready. I was ready. I was like, whoa, okay. And in somatic experiencing, you put your feet on the floor to steady yourself. So I took my left foot, which wasn't driving, and I jammed it onto the floor of the car. And the right foot, I'm just like, okay, just stay in the lane, just stay in the lane. And feelings washed through my body. I felt like I had the flu. I was having physical pain, like, you know, really, really intense. And I believe it lasted about maybe 30 seconds to 90 seconds. I don't know, so I couldn't really tell. But I could feel as it washed through me, it was almost like someone had finally taken the cork out of something that had been waiting to be released. Like if you have an infection and you just finally, it gets released. Like I had an abscess once in my tooth and they just drilled a hole. Relief. It was painful coming through, but as soon as it was over, I was like, oh, good. I knew I was done with depression. And literally that was however many years ago. I have never felt susceptible to depression again. So there is this way that I believe to be true, that trauma, these feelings we cannot feel because it's too dangerous and the adults are dangerous and there's no resources and you cannot feel them. You just must not feel them. So your whole nervous system shoves them down and puts them away, out of the way. Don't feel them, don't feel them. Stay strong, be cool, dissociate, look, you know, be okay. So you survive your childhood, you know, for whatever it is. And you don't have to have abuse to have these experiences. You can have them without abuse, just in case anybody's say, I didn't ever get abused. Well, this trauma, however it is, stores them. And at some point, we need to let them out. And as we develop resilience, we're able to let them out. And so your resilience, whatever that was this week, had developed enough for you to stay present while this big feeling came through.
Yeah, thank you. That's, and I, you know, it wasn't dramatic, but it was just interesting to me that the next day I just, it wasn't there anymore.
Yeah. And even though it wasn't dramatic, just a week earlier, you had not found the resources to feel it.
Very true. I was still just observing it. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But healing is happening, as my friend Dave likes to say.
All the time, in many, many ways, magical ways. Thank you.
My pleasure. So, beautiful Dave. If anyone else has any questions, feel free to throw them in the chat and maybe we'll quickly address them when we wrap up, before we wrap up. But I want to invite you to talk about 2 things. I really want you to talk about Sunday Sangha because of the incredible resource it is. And then I also really want you to talk about your upcoming course. And so just tell us about them so that we know the resources that you're offering.
Thank you so much, Mary. Yeah, happy to share. So like Mary, I come in part from the background of the training of the Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh. And he's very clear about like how this process works. I see it as 3 things that are non-negotiables. If you want to be living a life of love and understanding, as living in mindfulness is sometimes poetically described. I love that. Living a life of love and understanding. And the three things that requires are training, and I mean over an extended period of time, diligent and consistent training, an experienced teacher, because this is not something that the average person can figure out by themselves. It's arguable because, as we've been talking about, we're diving into blind spots. We're diving into places where we're numb and where we cannot see. So it's arguable that without a teacher that this is impossible, that it's not something that we can do alone. And then the third thing is community, which is the same thing. We need that for the same reason we need the teacher. This is too hard to do alone. It's too painful. It's too confusing. We're just not built to go through this kind of painful self-discovery and self-acceptance without the support and love and kindness of other human beings. That's not what a human being is, in my view. I don't think we're a solitary creature. Thich Nhat Hanh says it this way: happiness is not an individual matter. That's a quote from Thich Nhat Hanh. Happiness is not an individual matter. And so everything I do, to accept your invitation, Mary, to talk a little bit about my work, is trying to combine those three things: consistent training over time with the support of a teacher and a loving community, because I think that's what we all need all the time. And so on Sundays from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m., I have a gathering via Zoom. Renee is usually there. She's one of our Sangha members. The group is called Sangha Ocean Beach. And I lead a meditation very similar to the one we did together today, just a hair longer, like instead of 5 minutes, maybe it's 5 or 10. But it's very foundational, and it's just a chance for us to all arrive. And then I give a talk for 20 or 30 minutes. And then the second half of the hour, I take questions. And people share, just as we're doing now, about their experiences. And they get to ask me if they'd like direct questions about how they can hold them or how they can continue to practice with them. And I do that every Sunday. I've been doing that every Sunday since I left the monastery, 4 or 5 years ago. I miss one once in a while, but not once a year. It's pretty infrequent because it's my practice. Right? It's part of my practice.
I'd like to note that's 10 a.m. Pacific time for the record.
Oh, thanks, Mary. Yeah, and I'm dropping a link in the chat right now, and that's a link to a page on my website, which is davekenneally.com. And this one explains the 10-week course that I'm starting on February 8th. So I started working this way. This is the second time I've offered this, and what I see is, because I do a lot of this, right? This is what I do for a living. And so what I see is that I go to these organizations, these companies bring me in. I teach in high schools. I teach the teachers and the administrators. But very few people, in my estimation, can hear one talk about mindfulness, no matter how skillfully it's presented, no matter how many bells and whistles there are, no matter how good my slide deck is, and will actually make a change in their lives. It's just not enough training. It's not enough support. It's not enough community. And so what I'm experimenting with now is offering these 10-week courses where I send out an hour's worth of, recorded video teachings. And then we get together once a week like this via Zoom and discuss them. And this way, we have a supportive container the entire time. I'm sure very similar to what y'all are doing with Mary, in her classes. This is a model that I see works. And so if you're interested in that, go check out that link, and you'll see the breakdown of the 20 different pieces of the course. It has a lot of elements. It's really fun, but it's designed to address the issue that I think we're all dealing with right now in modern life, is that we're burned out, but we still wish we could do a little bit more. And so we want a particular kind of resilience. We don't want the resilience of because we all hear these self-help gurus, that are everywhere out there. And what are they saying? I hear them saying a lot of, you need to rest more, or you need to do less, or you need to become a minimalist, that's just not realistic. That's not my life. Like my life is, I wish I could answer more of my emails in a more timely way, right? I'm overwhelmed and I want to be able to address it because I'm doing things that I love. I'm doing things that I care about. And so for me, resilience is not about like moving further away from the world. It's about being able to move deeper into the world with increased capacity. And so my whole course is designed to, to use these practices to give us more capacity to meet our lives in a very loving way, to empower ourselves. And then I also have an email that I send out every Friday, which you'll be able to sign up if you go to my website. And it always has some kind of teaching. It's often a short video, like a 5-minute section of a talk that I've given. It'll have announcements about talks like this, that I attend on a regular basis. I'm actually about to start blogging on it as well. So if you're a blogging person, there's going to be a blog on there next month. So that's just an easy way to, sign up to get an email from me every Friday and just to stay connected. And then lastly, of course, my 10-week course includes a one-on-one consultation with me. I find it very beneficial to ultimately talk to people one-on-one. And so if you're even thinking about the course or coming to the Sangha, or if you just want to talk to me more, on that page, you'll see a place where you can sign up for a free half hour with me and just come talk to me. And we can see if, the kind of work that I'm doing, the kind of community that I'm creating might be a beneficial addition to your personal practice. And if not, I might steer you somewhere else. Thanks, Mary.
Yeah, beautiful. Thanks, Dave. The Sangha, so Sangha means community. It's just a word that means community. We could easily say community, but when Dave and I were both going to Sangha, the community that was the Sangha was such a valuable hold for me. I felt welcomed, loved, seen, not judged. We had this thing called Dharma sharing where you would just say what was true for you, and one of the rules was no crosstalk, like leave them alone. And it was a way for me to begin to express things I'd never been able to express before. And I just want to really emphasize that, this consistency of community is really, really healing. And so I want to appreciate so much that you have been offering it so consistently. I love how not all the time, but not once a year. I don't cancel once, that's a very high degree of consistency, and that's a really, really, really nice thing. So, yeah. So thank you. I see it's 3:56, so we're almost at the hour and a half mark here. And Teresa did ask one question, and I have a specific resource that I'm going to give to Teresa, but I think I'd love to just answer this one last question, and then we'll wrap it up if nothing else has come up. How's that sound, Dave?
Sounds good. Sounds good.
Okay, great. So we were, of course, talking about with Rhonda, and when I was talking about this thing in the car, this feeling a wave of motion in the body, or a wave of feeling. It's not necessarily emotion. It could be sensation. It could be a flood of thoughts, actually. But it's a wave of stuff in the body as a way of releasing trauma. And Teresa asked, is it possible to feel the emotion behind a chronic disease or bodily symptom? There are things I want to heal and feel stuck. I've been to the doctor, but I want to have a way of dealing with it emotionally. And I'm going to send you a resource with a thing. David Bedrick is doing this thing with chronic illness, which is really, I think, going to be powerful. I'm going to send you. But I would like to note that absolutely the answer is yes. And there is a way that as we develop the capacity to be present with our feelings, as just in the way Rhonda demonstrated so beautifully, that she was able suddenly to notice a feeling that she couldn't feel the week before, and having felt it, it was essentially gone. As we develop this capacity to feel our feelings, there are feelings that are connected to chronic illness. And interestingly, they might not be physiologically obviously connected. I've had a couple of moments in my life where something released, and I right away knew it was connected to a chronic health condition that I had that then cleared up, done. And the connection wasn't necessarily obvious, that the logical mind is not the part of us that has any real efficacy here, but that as we simply, I'm just going to take the word simply out of there, as we do the incredibly fucking hard work, as we allow our, as we develop the capacity to stay present with what is, that the nervous system itself is working toward healing, just as the mind and the flesh are working toward healing. And it wants to get this little shard of stuff out. It wants to heal this chronic response to it. And it happens by itself. So you don't really have to go digging. And when you do go digging, you probably can't even necessarily see the obvious connection. But the answer is yes, there is wisdom in the body that literally physiological symptoms as can be expressions of this emotional containment or suppression, that's what I mean, containment. And when we find the space for it to be released, there's a physiological change in the body. So would you like to say anything on that, Dave?
Sure. Prior to becoming a full-time mindfulness teacher, I was a yoga and massage therapist for 17 years. So I've thought about this a lot. I've spent a lot of time with people in chronic illness, chronic pain. I worked with, doing yoga therapy and mindfulness practices with people at end of life who were going through chemo and radiation for cancer. I ran a clinic for the American Cancer Society, teaching yoga teachers how to work with people that were dying for some years in New York City. So I've thought about this a lot. Here's my take on it. If somebody new joined the call right now and they were in pain, and it doesn't matter whether that pain is physical, whether that pain is emotional, or whether that pain is psychological, doesn't matter. They're in pain, and they come on the call and they bow in, and they say like, "Hey, everybody, I want to tell you about my pain. Please listen to my pain." Now imagine that we all ignore them, right? That Mary mutes that person and that we just keep going, right? Think about how they feel. Like, picture it in your mind. They're gonna feel even worse, right? That pain that they're experiencing is going to increase. They may increase their volume in their demand, right, to have that need to be heard met. They may stand up, they might start shouting. So now imagine the exact same scenario, the same person, the same pain, the same desire to be heard, but now we do the opposite, right? And Mary invites them to unmute and says like, "Hey, I just want to let you know," as Mary would, like, "We're just here for you. Like, we're not even going to try to solve your problem necessarily. We just want to listen first. Like, please, we want to understand what you're experiencing. Can you please share?" Right? Now picture that person, right? They're leaning back in their chair. They're sighing. They are starting to feel safer. They are starting to relax. Nothing has changed. And yet already their pain is diminishing. Their volume is diminishing, just inside of the safety of the listening. And this is described by the American mindfulness teacher, Jon Kabat-Zinn, who created mindfulness-based stress reduction, as his definition of healing is coming to terms with what is. Notice there's no fixing, there's no problem solving, there's no change in his definition of healing. Healing is coming to terms with what is. And so I believe, and it's been my experience now working with people in that way for over 20 years, is that yes, we can get to the depths of what's going on. But first, we have to spend a lot of time just listening. We have to spend a lot of time just coming to terms with the pain, whatever way that pain is manifesting itself in. And then eventually, that part of us that's in that pain will calm down enough and will lower the volume enough because it can trust that we're listening in, as I like to say, in a loving way, right? That we're paying attention with love. And then it will start to share its secrets. And then we'll start to be able to understand the layers that have been hidden, the spots that are blind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. And then it'll start to share its secrets. That's really a beautiful, beautiful way to put it, that we have, there's so much within us that we don't know about because it is, I mean, I will just acknowledge from a trauma point of view, it was too dangerous to share this. It was too dangerous to feel this. It was too dangerous to recognize this for yourself. It is why I learned how to, or not how to, why I learned to suppress the knowledge that I had to pee or needed to eat or was tired or cold. I suppressed this knowledge because acknowledging it put me in danger. It put me in a position where I was possibly subject to worse. So, so as we reconnect with these parts of ourselves that have been suppressed, they need an inordinate amount of safety in order to begin to whisper hello. In order to be able to whisper, I'm here, in order to be able to whisper, help me, please. So we just continue to create this gentle awareness of self, but these parts, they want to be heard. They really do. Beautiful.
What a nice note to end on.
What a nice note to end on.
Mm.
Don't y'all love Dave? Like, isn't he just the best? Oh, well, so we'll wrap up. And, one of the things we do in the tradition of mindfulness, in the community of mindfulness tradition, is we bow. And actually, the bow is traditionally sometimes with hands like this rather than like this. And this represents the lotus flower, which represents like enlightenment. And we are like literally offering the gift of a lotus to the person we are bowing to. And at the end of our Sangha in Brooklyn, I think we used to do this there, right, Dave? In any case, I've done it for decades. I like to say, may the fruits of our practice benefit all beings. And so I would just like to say, may the fruits of our practice together benefit all beings, starting with you. And may, a lotus for you, a wise one. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, everybody. Yeah. Thanks for helping me heal with your listening today. Thank you.